Game 1 of the NBA Finals featured a little bit of everything, from incredible returns to brilliant defensive strategies to big-time shot making and a comeback, but the biggest storyline is just how dominant the Celtics looked, making it clear that this is not the same team from years prior. One of the most interesting topics heading into Game 1 was how the Mavs would handle Boston's 5-out offense, and right away that proved to be an issue. Typical transition defense doesn't apply when the fourth option is capable of stepping into off-the-dribble threes, but when they were set in the half court, Dallas threw an early counter, going to a zone just a minute and a half into the game. The Celtics used Tatum as a screener to get the switch before setting him up in the middle, and right here he should have gotten the ball. Holiday misses him though, and Jalen comes off a screen for a three that doesn't drop. However, Jalen was the one who got their offense going in the first. Here he's able to beat the zone by attacking the middle, which collapses the defense and leaves Derek White with a great look from three for another miss. They get the rebound and Jalen gets an open three, same exact result. The thing about this team though is that as long as the pressure is being applied consistently, it's only a matter of time before the shots start falling. On this one, it's Horford who gets a great look from the corner and he knocks it down. For this reason, if you want any chance at stopping Boston, it's imperative that you don't let their wings touch the paint. And Jalen just couldn't be contained. On the other side of things, the Celtics did what many expected and put Tatum on the 5. That leaves Horford on Derek Jones where he can roam the floor as a paint protector, and they made it clear that they would not respect Jones as a shooter. It was Jalen who got the Luka assignment, and that's one of those rare offensive players who can pretty much get a bucket at will, but Jalen did a really good job. He met him with constant ball pressure to make the offense start a touch further than it typically would, this time picking his pocket and leaking out in the open floor for some free offense the other way. The whole idea of this Tatum at the 5 strategy was to neutralize the Mavs rollers. If they want to attack Horford, they'll have to use one of those wings as the screener, to which it becomes a lot easier for the big man to execute standard pick and roll coverages. For the most part though, Horford just switched onto the ball, and I'll be the first to admit that I was really surprised with how well he held up in space. When he starts on the big instead of a wing, and then switches, the dynamic is a little bit different. Not only is Gafford a much bigger threat on the roll, he's also harder to contain on the offensive glass. So the first few minutes ended up being pretty evenly matched. The Celtics found themselves up 12-11 when Kyrie forced a turnover and drew a foul, but now it was time for Kristaps Porzingis to enter the game. You've got the same strategy. If Luka wants to attack Kristaps, it's going to be a wing setting the screen. On the first one, they try a blitz, and Luka easily splits it on a drive where he gets to this ridiculous finish. Next time it's Kyrie, and Kristaps sits back in a deep drop to protect the paint. That leaves Jones wide open on a pop, but like I said, they aren't respecting that shot. And when you're able to play Kristaps in this deep drop, with a wing rolling instead of a big, he's able to completely shut off the paint, as he's one of the best rim protectors in the sport. The risk with playing this coverage though is that it can leave Luka with too much space. On this one he starts to drop, and by the time he realizes he needs to step up, it's too late. But when Luka checked out, the offense completely fell apart. Now it's Jaden Hardy coming off a screen, who's not exactly the same sort of threat, or it's Kyrie and he's hunting for a switch onto Sam Hauser. The thing is, Boston's okay with that. Instead of giving up a numbers advantage, they'd rather let them get the switch and stagnate the offense with one-on-one ball. Then when Kyrie attacks Kristaps, it's a high drop, to which he not only protects the rim, he blocks a pull-up jumper. The most notable effects of having Kristaps on the court were felt on offense though. Of course, he's a big-time floor spacer, meaning that when Tatum drives, there's no help at the nail. That makes it a lot easier for him to apply pressure before kicking it out to White for a corner three. This wasn't even the Mavs' biggest problem. That was the way Kristaps attacked switches and absolutely abused mismatches in isolation. Dallas was switching almost every action and hoped that by forcing him to catch the ball further, they could take him out of his comfort zone. Well, that isn't at all what happened. Even when they send Lively over early to load up on these plays, it has virtually no effect because Kristaps isn't trying to get into the defense, he's just shooting right over it. Speaking of Lively, he had his hands every bit as full. On this one, Kristaps appears to be setting up a dribble handoff, only to keep the ball on a drive where he makes it clear just how recovered he is from that injury. Of course, all of this is without even mentioning how deadly he is from behind the arc. In transition, most bigs are used to first dropping back to the middle, then finding their man. Against a 7'3" unicorn who can step into 30-footers, the rules change a little bit. And by this point, the Celtics were firing on all cylinders. In the final minute, you've got Sam Hauser hitting a tough transition 3 of his own to put them up 17. That takes us to the final possession, where Tatum gets stripped on a drive, and it looks like the Mavs might be able to close the quarter on a strong note. Kristaps had different plans. So through 12 minutes of play, the Celtics hold a 37-20 lead. And that 17-point margin is the largest of any first quarter in NBA Finals history. In quarter number 2, that suffocating defense picked up right where they left off. When Derrick Jones screens, Horford's gonna switch on to Luka, but what I want you to focus on is Jalen, because he doesn't follow Jones to the corner. Instead, he sits in Luka's driving lane, not letting him get to the rim, yet he still finds Gafford down low for some points. And they did the same against Kyrie. Like I said, they're comfortable leaving him on Hauser, and Holiday has completely abandoned Jones in the weak side corner. Sometimes though, great defense is just countered by better offense. However, that was not the case in this game 1. They let Kyrie play one-on-one all night, and he really struggled to get anything going. Some of it was him missing shots he normally makes, but also the guys who are supposed to be mismatches held up way better than expected, especially Peyton Pritchard. As for the Celtics offense, with both Tatum and Kristaps on the bench, it was all about Jalen. He was hunting for that Luka matchup and getting pretty much whatever he wanted. All playoffs long, the Mavs have been comfortable switching Luka onto the ball in these situations, but Jalen's explosiveness is on another level, easily beating him off the dribble for this massive dunk. And this is where Boston's 5-out makes things impossibly difficult on the defense, because what the Mavs like to do is put Luka on the ball and then have everyone else sink into the gaps to prevent drives. The only way you can do that against the Celtics is by leaving a great shooter open and hoping they miss. A few minutes into the quarter, it was time for Kristaps to return, and this is when they went to their double big lineup. Horford switches onto Luka, and notice how he sits on the left hip. That takes away the step back 3, forcing him inside the arc, where he's running into the 7'3" wall that's parked in front of the rim. Then when they force Kristaps into the action, he's back in that deep drop, leaving PJ on an island above the break. The Mavs are going to need these shots to start falling if they want any chance at winning this series. Because if not, the Celtics will just put all of their focus on Luka. And the reality is that as good as he is at scoring one-on-one, this diet of shots is not efficient enough to keep up with what Boston's doing on the other end. So they tried something different. They took out their bigs and put Kleba at the 5 for a little more space. The Celtics just continued to switch all of the actions though, and basically turned the game into a one-on-one between Luka and whoever stood in his way. That's if he can get the ball past half court though, because he still has to deal with the constant pressure from Jalen, who once again picks his pocket, with the same result on a free lane to the cup. To make things even tougher, Boston even incorporated some pre-switching during this time, meaning that when Horford's man goes to set a screen, he's gonna have White pick up for him while he stays glued to the baseline. It doesn't even matter though, because Kleba sets an illegal. When Horford is in the action, they're mixing it up. Instead of a switch this time, it's a hedge as he waits for Drew to recover, then the play resets with no advantage. The result? An errant pass from Kyrie that really summarizes this stretch from the Mavs. It also doesn't help that during this time, the Celtics were absolutely rolling on offense. Kristaps continues to attack mismatches, and the guy just can't miss a shot. Even when they push the entry pass all the way out to the three-point line, it doesn't matter. He had 18 points in the first half and only missed 2 shots. When he checks out, they still have a 5-out look, so once that initial advantage is created, all they have to do is move the ball and it'll find an open shooter somewhere on the court, and the level of versatility that this spacing unlocks can't be overstated. By putting their 5 in the corner and a guard in the dunker spot, there's no rim protector in position when Drew gets into the defense and drops it off to White. The Mavs attempted to counter by again going to that zone, but the Celtics were prepared. They set Tatum up on an open side of the floor for a ball screen, and he uses that space to pull up for a 3, which puts them up by 29, or double what the Mavs have. Then when they went back to man, it was right back to mismatch hunting. Tatum gets the switch onto Kyrie, sets up in the middle of the floor for an isolation, and you can really see the effects of all that spacing. Next time down, they go to the exact same setup. Tatum screens, gets the switch, seals off position in the middle, but White decides to move it to Kristaps on the wing because he's feeling a 30-foot triple. This game was very quickly getting out of hand, and it could have ended up being a one-half affair if not for the heroics of Luka Doncic. He really started to heat up, and it didn't matter who stood in his way, he was getting to his spots at will. When Kristaps picks him up on a switch, that's an easy blow-by, and when Horford loads up in the paint, nobody tags PJ in the dunker spot. I mentioned how well Jalen played him, even he was being served buckets during this stretch, and when he once again gets Kristaps on an island, that just isn't fair. He threatens another drive before pulling back, where he creates a ton of space for a 3. So by the end of the half, instead of being down 29 or more, it's a 21-point game. Lots of work to do, but not impossible. In the third, the Mavs adjusted their defense a little bit. They started to send more attention towards Jason Tatum, forcing everyone else to make plays, and some of those shots stopped falling as consistently. When he gets the switch onto Luka and sets up for an isolation, you can see Gafford loading up early to protect the paint from a drive, and Tatum actually gets the ball poked from behind. Whenever Tatum comes off a screen from a big, they're putting 2 on the ball to get it out of his hands, and this is a good shot for Horford, it just doesn't drop. Then whenever he isolates, you have that early load up, not just from the wings sitting in the gaps, but also the low man stepping up, forcing him to operate more in traffic. That's not to say he didn't have any success. On this one, he does a great job of getting down the middle, then goes up strong at the rim, and this time he sort of gets zoned up, to which he applies pressure before making the right read, but like I said, they were starting to miss some shots. Then it was time to get Kristaps back in the game, and Dallas countered with a jumbo lineup of both Kleba and Lively on the floor, the idea being to take away mismatch hunting by having more bodies to throw at the big man. It also gave them an extra rim protector, meaning those drives to the rim were made even more difficult as the perimeter guys continued to struggle from 3. Like I said, they'll give up the switch with Luka on Tatum, but you've got the rest of the defense sitting in gaps with Lively waiting under the basket, and they're not really getting anything besides those spot-up jumpers. With so many stops to fall back on, the Mavs were able to slowly chip into the lead with their one-on-one scoring. When Kyrie attacks, he's being hounded by Drew Holiday, but this time Gafford's there for a putback. Even though Drew's an amazing defender, Kyrie was still able to create a lot of the shots he typically likes to get to. Especially in transition, this pull-up jumper is a staple in his game, he just couldn't consistently knock them down. When Luka initiates and pulls Horford into the action with a high ball screen, it's still going to be a switch. And remember, I mentioned how he's sitting on that left hip. Luka tries to adjust with a step back to his right, which isn't where he's most comfortable. Kyrie's got his back though, because next time down, he's the one who gets the Horford switch, and with some crafty ball handling, he's got a free lane to the rim. You can just see how seamless this Mavs offense was. Luka brings the ball down and Horford's man sets an early screen to get the switch, then from there they play one-on-one, and Luka once again started to really heat up. When Kristaps checks in, they go to a pre-switch to keep him out of the action, so Luka just attacks Derek White and hits a step-back 3. Then when Kristaps has to defend the action, he's going to sit back in the deep drop, to which Luka steps into a pull-up 3. Just like that, we've got an 8-point game. Against Kyrie, it's the exact same thing. The deep drop, all of that space to step into a jumper, but like I said, this just wasn't his night. He shot 6 of 19, or below 32% from the field, and while I think some of that could be attributed to the defense of Holiday, there were a lot of good opportunities he failed to convert on, and I think it's fair to assume that this is the worst version of Kyrie we'll see in this series. Still, the Mavs had worked it down to single digits, and right when it looked like they might be able to make it a competitive game in the fourth, Boston's defense locked all the way in. They mixed up their matchups to keep the Mavs guessing. This one starts with Holiday on Gafford so that they can keep Horford on the baseline, playing free safety to protect the rim. They're also mixing up the coverage. Instead of a switch, this one's a hedge, and watch Jalen completely blow up the play, but the possession doesn't end there, and neither does Jalen's impact. Because they move the ball, Jones thinks he has a dunk, only for another huge denial at the rim. And that also wasn't his only big time play down low. 90 seconds later, he again finds himself underneath the basket, and when Kyrie thinks he has a layup, he doesn't. I think you could argue that this third quarter was the best basketball Jalen has ever played, because in addition to those defensive stops, he was the one who finally broke down that Mavs defense. Instead of driving and kicking like they wanted him to, he was going right into the chest of Lively. No matter how many bodies they sent his way, he'd slash right through, getting to the big man and initiating contact, where he forced Lively into picking up his 4th and 5th fouls. That got him out of the game and made that paint all the more vulnerable. So he continued to drive the gaps and collapse the defense. Remember I said that by applying constant pressure, the shots will eventually fall? Well, that time arrived, so they started to get whatever they wanted. It takes 2 defenders to contain Jalen, nobody picks up Horford in the corner, and he's got a great look from 3. Then for a little cherry on top, next time Jalen sets up the offense, he decides to try his hand at a pull-up triple, which hits nothing but net. Just this 4-minute stretch from Jalen completely changed the trajectory of this game. Dallas cut it down to 8, and it looked like we might end up with a clutch time scenario, only for them to close the quarter on a 14-2 run, entering the fourth with a 20-point lead. And in that fourth, the Mavs, well, really Luka, tried his absolute hardest to drag them back into the game. He started to force the issue, attacking with intent to score regardless of how many bodies they put in front of him, but that ended up in a shootout that he just couldn't win. They were never able to cut the deficit lower than 17 as the Celtics continued to apply pressure and maintain that lead. With 8.5 minutes to go, this steal from Derek White that led to easy fast break points, to me felt like the dagger. And if it wasn't, well, this corner 3 from Holiday to put them up 24 definitely was. So Boston ends up defending their home court in dominant fashion, going up by as many as 29, responding to a 21-point comeback by slamming the door, and walking out of the arena with an 18-point win. To me, there were multiple major keys in this game. For one, the shooting of the Mavs. Outside of Luka, they only got 13 threes up, and they hit 3 of them. That's not exactly ideal, especially when Boston's defensive strategy was focused on limiting bigs. Remember how Lively and Gafford feasted in the conference finals? Well, that was gone in this one. The two combined for 10 points and didn't catch a single lob. No lobs, no threes. That's how you end up with a passer of Luka's caliber only ending the game with 1 assist, and the Celtics wanted that. They know he'll cook anyone in isolation, but if he's getting 30 on 26 shots while nobody else is scoring, the offense is not going to produce good results. An offensive rating of just 96.7 is the lowest Dallas has recorded in any game during these playoffs, a testament to the scheme and personnel of the Celtics. On the other end, they'll have to find a way to counter that mismatch hunting. Luka clearly cannot contain Jalen or Jason off the dribble, and I don't think the answer is to leave shooters and hope they start missing. I'd expect less switching, more aggressive coverages, then rotating behind the play to cover all bases. That's especially important against Kristaps because every time they gave him a mismatch, it felt like giving up a layup. So we'll have to wait and see what adjustments Kidd and his staff make heading into Game 2, because as things currently stand, the Celtics made it very clear that they have the advantage. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you thought of this matchup. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.